Zora Jenkins clutched the gold pendant as security dragged her away from the mansion. "She stole my granddaughter," Victoria Carlton screamed, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. The billionaire collapsed to her knees. 20 years of searching, ended by a necklace Zora bought at a thrift store. Where are you watching from today? Take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to hear how a simple necklace revealed a decades-old conspiracy that changed two families forever. Get ready for a story of shocking betrayal, racial injustice, and a reunion that shattered a pharmaceutical empire. Zora Jenkins was exhausted but determined. At 23 years old, she was already juggling 3 jobs while maintaining a near-perfect GPA in Boston Medical University's competitive nursing program. Despite ranking in the top 5% of her class, Zora had watched as less qualified white classmates secured prestigious internships and research opportunities that somehow remained just beyond her reach. Her primary supervisor, Dr. Green, never missed an opportunity to scrutinize her work with a level of criticism he never seemed to apply to her white peers. Just yesterday, he had assigned her to inventory supply closets while selecting Emily Thompson, who regularly asked Zora for help understanding case studies for the coveted cardiac rotation. Zora had learned early to hide her frustration behind a professional smile. Tonight was no different, as she adjusted the black bow tie on her catering uniform, preparing to serve the wealthy elite at the exclusive Carlton Foundation charity gala. The evening catering job paid more than her hospital aide position, and Zora needed every dollar to cover next semester's tuition. The catering manager, Mr. Peterson, a thin white man with perpetually pursed lips, had been explicit during their brief orientation. "Remember, you are invisible tonight. These people don't want to see you, just what you're carrying." His eyes had lingered a moment too long on Zora and the 3 other black servers. Beacon Hill's finest will be attending. No mistakes. She had noticed immediately how the white servers were assigned to interact with guests, taking drink orders and offering hors d'oeuvres, while black staff were primarily relegated to kitchen duties or clearing used dishes. Zora had been positioned at the champagne station, far from the main reception area. Before leaving the staff area, Zora touched the brass pendant hanging around her neck for luck, then tucked it beneath her uniform where it wouldn't be visible. The unusual geometric pendant, with its intricate pattern resembling interconnected triangles, had been her lucky charm since finding it at a thrift store 5 years ago. The Carlton mansion was unlike anything Zora had ever seen, a stark contrast to her cramped apartment in Roxbury, where sirens served as nightly lullabies. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, and original artwork lined walls that had probably never known a water stain or chipped paint. Wealth existed here in a different dimension, one where Zora's daily struggles were unimaginable abstractions. She moved through the crowd as instructed, invisible yet observant. The guests, predominantly white and dripping with designer labels and family heirlooms, discussed charitable tax write-offs and vacation properties, while sipping champagne worth more than Zora's weekly grocery budget. Victoria Carlton, the 80-year-old pharmaceutical magnate whose family name adorned half the buildings in Boston's medical district, held court near the grand staircase. Her silver hair was immaculately styled, her posture regal despite her advanced age. A tall, stern-looking man, Zora, recognized as Marshall Carlton, Victoria's son and company's CEO, hovered protectively at her side. Zora approached with her tray of champagne flutes, careful to keep her eyes downcast as instructed. A slight shift in the crowd forced her closer to Victoria than intended. As she extended her tray, offering refreshments to a guest nearby, Victoria Carlton glanced in her direction. Their eyes met for the briefest moment before Zora could look away. The crystal champagne flute Victoria had been holding slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a crash that silenced the entire room. "I'm so sorry," Zora immediately apologized, kneeling to collect the broken glass. "Get away from her," Marshall Carlton snapped, gesturing to security. "Peterson, control your staff." The catering manager appeared instantly, face flushed with anger. "Miss Jenkins, this is unacceptable. You can collect your final check and leave immediately." Victoria Carlton remained frozen, her eyes fixed on Zora, or more specifically, on the pendant that had slipped from beneath her uniform as she bent down. "Stop!" Victoria's voice was surprisingly powerful for her age. The room fell silent again as she stepped forward, trembling visibly. "Everyone, stay where you are." Security guards materialized around them as Victoria reached toward Zora, not in anger but with shaking fingers extended toward the necklace. "Where did you get that?" she whispered, her voice now barely audible. The look in the elderly woman's eyes wasn't accusatory, but filled with disbelief and something Zora couldn't quite identify. It looked almost like hope. "She's obviously stolen it." Marshall Carlton stepped between them, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the confused crowd. "Security! Check her for other items." Zora clutched her pendant protectively, stepping back. "I didn't steal anything. I bought this at a thrift store 5 years ago for $7. Victoria Carlton's eyes never left the necklace. "Marshall, enough. I want to speak with this young woman privately." Her tone left no room for argument, though her son clearly disapproved. "Mother, this isn't appropriate. Let security handle this, and we can continue with our evening." Victoria's response was immediate and firm. "My study now. The young lady comes with me." She turned to Zora. "What is your name, dear?" The question caught Zora off guard, after being treated as invisible all evening. "Zora Jenkins, ma'am." Victoria nodded, as if confirming something to herself. "Miss Jenkins, would you please join me for a moment?" It wasn't really a question. Marshall signaled 2 security guards to follow as Victoria led the way through the grand foyer toward a corridor lined with oil portraits of stern-looking men and women who shared the same aristocratic features as the Carltons. Zora followed, acutely aware of the security personnel flanking her like prison escorts. The study was smaller than expected, but no less opulent, with leather-bound books lining walnut shelves and a massive desk that appeared carved from a single piece of mahogany. Victoria Carlton settled into a high-backed chair and gestured for Zora to sit opposite her. The security guards positioned themselves at the door, watching Zora's every move. "May I?" Victoria asked, reaching toward the pendant. Reluctantly, Zora leaned forward, allowing the elderly woman to examine the necklace without removing it. Victoria's fingers trembled as she traced the geometric pattern. After a long moment, she released the pendant and turned toward an ornate jewelry box on her desk. From it, she withdrew an identical necklace, except this version was platinum rather than brass, with tiny diamonds embedded at each intersection of the geometric design. "This necklace was custom designed for my daughter Rebecca 30 years ago," Victoria explained, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "The pattern was created by her husband, based on a mathematical equation they developed together." Marshall remained at the doorway, his expression darkening. "Mother, this is unnecessary. The girl obviously found or stole a cheap copy." Victoria ignored him, her focus entirely on Zora. "My daughter Rebecca was brilliant, a researcher specializing in pharmaceutical development. She met and fell in love with a doctor named Elijah Johnson. He was equally brilliant, a neurosurgeon with innovative approaches to treatment." She paused, seeming to gather herself. "He was also black, which caused quite the scandal in our social circles. I'm ashamed to admit I was not immediately supportive of their relationship." Zora shifted uncomfortably, unsure why she was being told this family history. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carlton, but what does this have to do with my necklace?" Rebecca and Elijah married despite the objections. Victoria continued, as if Zora hadn't spoken. She became pregnant soon after. They were ecstatic, already planning their child's future. Her voice faltered. During her 8th month, Rebecca experienced complications. She was admitted to Carlton Medical Center, where she reportedly died during childbirth, along with her infant daughter. Marshall stepped forward. "Mother, this is enough. This server doesn't need to hear our family tragedy. She needs to be removed from the premises before she steals something of actual value." Victoria's gaze sharpened. "She stays, Marshall." There was steel beneath the elderly woman's polite exterior. Victoria turned back to Zora, studying her face with uncomfortable intensity. "How old are you, Miss Jenkins?" 23, Zora answered, increasingly confused by the conversation. Born when? April 18th, 2001. Victoria's breath caught. Were you adopted, Miss Jenkins? The question sent an unexpected chill through Zora. No, I was a ward of the state. Foster care until 18. Marshall made a dismissive noise. Mother, surely you don't think this is some long-lost relative? She's obviously here to exploit your grief. These people always have an angle. These people? Zora stood abruptly, her professional mask slipping. I'm a nursing student working a catering job to pay tuition. I don't even know what you're implying. Victoria raised a hand placatingly. Please, sit. Marshall, your comments are unnecessary and unwelcome. She reached for a framed photograph on her desk, turning it to face Zora. The image showed a young white woman with auburn hair standing beside a tall, handsome black man in a doctor's coat. They were both beaming, the woman's hand resting on her pregnant belly. My daughter and her husband, 3 weeks before she died. Zora couldn't help noticing she had the same high cheekbones and eye shape as the man in the photo. Victoria seemed to notice it too, her gaze moving between the photograph and Zora's face. The situation became too intense for Zora when she noticed Victoria's breathing becoming labored, her hand pressing against her chest. Mrs. Carlton, are you all right? Zora's nursing instincts took over as she moved to check the older woman's pulse. Your heartbeat is irregular. Do you have medication? Victoria appeared surprised by Zora's professional assessment. In my purse. The small pill case. Zora retrieved the medication and a glass of water, administering it with practiced efficiency as Marshall watched suspiciously. Where did you learn that? Victoria asked after her breathing normalized. I'm in my final year of nursing at Boston Medical. Clinical rotations in cardiology. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. Miss Jenkins, I have an unusual request. Would you consider taking a DNA test? I would compensate you, of course. $10,000 for your time, regardless of the outcome. The sum was staggering to Zora, nearly a year's tuition. Why would you want my DNA? Call it an old woman's curiosity, Victoria replied, though her eyes suggested much more. Marshall stepped forward. This is absurd. Mother, you can't just offer money to every young black woman who reminds you of Elijah. Victoria's response was ice cold. I've indulged your control over many aspects of my life, Marshall, but my personal finances remain my own. Zora considered the offer. The money would solve her immediate financial problems, though the situation felt increasingly strange. If I agree, this stays confidential? Just between us? Victoria nodded. Absolutely. My lawyer will draw up an agreement. Then yes, Zora decided, I'll do it. Relief visibly washed over Victoria's face. Thank you. Thomas will contact you tomorrow with details. Marshall leaned close to his mother as Zora prepared to leave. Another gold digger, mother. When will you learn? Though he spoke softly, Zora heard every word. As security escorted her from the study, Zora noticed a partially hidden photograph on a bookshelf. It showed the same black doctor from the earlier picture, standing alone in surgical scrubs. Unlike the previous happy image, this one captured a serious, determined expression. The security guard noticed her interest and roughly guided her away. Don't get any ideas. The Carltons have enough trouble without people like you snooping around. As they reached the service entrance, he added a final warning. Don't come back here. Mrs. Carlton may be sentimental, but the rest of us know what you people are really after. The Boston University Medical Library was nearly empty at 9 in the morning, exactly how Zora preferred it. After the bizarre encounter at the Carlton mansion 3 days ago, she couldn't focus on her regular studies. Something about Victoria Carlton's story and her reaction to the necklace kept nagging at her. Why would a billionaire offer $10,000 for a DNA test from a random server? Zora navigated to the library's digital archives, searching for information about the Carlton family. The results were extensive, covering the pharmaceutical empire's century-long history. Victoria's father had founded Carlton Pharmaceuticals during World War II, initially manufacturing antibiotics for the military. Under Victoria's leadership in the 70s and 80s, the company expanded aggressively into consumer medications. One particular article caught Zora's attention. Carlton Pharmaceuticals faces criticism for urban testing practices. The piece, dated 1993, detailed allegations that the company had conducted drug trials in predominantly black neighborhoods without proper informed consent protocols. The cases were eventually settled out of court, the terms sealed. Zora continued searching, focusing now on Rebecca Carlton. She found a Society page announcement from 1999, Carlton Heiress Weds Doctor, Causes Stir. The article described the controversial union between Rebecca Carlton and Dr. Elijah Johnson, noting that many prominent Boston families had declined to attend the ceremony. The final paragraph mentioned Rebecca's pregnancy, but Zora couldn't find any subsequent articles about the birth or death. The lack of coverage seemed strange for such a prominent family. A Boston Globe obituary from 2001 simply stated that Rebecca Carlton Johnson, aged 28, had passed away due to complications during childbirth at Carlton Medical Center. No funeral details were provided, and the infant wasn't mentioned by name. Zora made notes of dates and names, a timeline forming in her mind. April 2001, the same month and year of her birth. Could it really be coincidence? During her lunch break, Zora called a number she'd found for Gladys Washington, a retired nurse who had worked at Carlton Medical Center's maternity ward for 3 decades. "Hello, Miss Washington. My name is Zora Jenkins. I'm a nursing student researching historical cases at Carlton Medical." A pause on the line. "What kind of cases, exactly?" The woman's voice was cautious. "I'm particularly interested in April 2001. There was a high-profile patient, Rebecca Carlton Johnson." The line went silent for so long that Zora thought the call had dropped. Finally, Gladys spoke again, her voice lowered. "Why are you really asking about this?" That was a difficult time. Records from that period mysteriously disappeared during a system upgrade. Zora's pulse quickened. "Disappeared? All of them?" "Listen, young lady, I'm retired now. I don't need trouble from the Carltons. They have long memories and longer reach. Please," Zora pressed, "I just need to understand what happened." Another long pause. "Meet me at Riverside Coffee tomorrow at 3. I can't promise anything, but I'll hear you out." The next day, when Zora arrived at her clinical rotation, Dr. Green was waiting with an unusual level of scrutiny. "Jenkins, you were 20 minutes late to Professor Wilson's lecture yesterday." Zora maintained her professional composure despite her surprise. "I wasn't aware attendance was being monitored so closely, Dr. Green. I had a research project in the library that ran long." His eyes narrowed. "Your academic performance has been slipping. Several faculty members have noted your absences." The statement was patently false. Zora knew her work had been exemplary, but she recognized the veiled threat. "I'll be more mindful of my schedule, sir." As she changed into scrubs, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging if you know what's good for you." Zora stared at the message, a chill running down her spine. She deleted it immediately but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That afternoon, instead of meeting Gladys Washington, Zora visited her grandmother's old friend, Loretta Davis, who had worked as a housekeeper for several wealthy Boston families. The elderly woman welcomed her with warm hugs and sweet tea in her modest Dorchester apartment. "Grandma always said you knew all the secrets of Boston's rich folks," Zora said after they'd settled in the small living room. Loretta chuckled. "Your grandma gave me too much credit." "But yes, household staff hear things not meant for our ears. Did you ever work for the Carltons?" Loretta's smile faded. "No, child. That family had standards about who they'd allow in their home, if you understand my meaning. But I had friends who did." She leaned forward. "Why are you asking?" Zora hesitated before showing her the pendant. "I met Victoria Carlton. She had a strong reaction to this necklace." Loretta examined it carefully. "I don't recognize it, but there were always rumors about that family, especially after the daughter married a black doctor." "What kind of rumors?" "Dark ones. About babies disappearing from the hospital where the Carlton family had influence. Mostly black babies whose mothers were young or unmarried. They'd be told their babies died during birth, but bodies were never shown." Loretta shook her head. Nothing ever proven, of course. Just whispers among staff. The conversation left Zora unsettled. That evening, she pulled out her own birth records, obtained when she aged out of foster care. The documentation was sparse, listing her as abandoned at Boston Memorial Hospital with no parents named. Her birth certificate was a delayed registration, filed when she was nearly 1 year old. 2 days later, a courier delivered an envelope to Zora's apartment. Inside was a DNA test result on Carlton Foundation letterhead. The conclusion was highlighted. 99.8% probability of grandparent divided by grandchild relationship with Victoria Carlton. Zora sank onto her sofa, the paper trembling in her hands. Everything she thought she knew about herself was suddenly in question. Who was she really? Later that afternoon, while walking back from campus, Zora noticed a black luxury sedan parked across from her apartment building. Through the tinted window, she glimpsed Marshall Carlton watching her building. That evening, another courier delivery. An invitation to meet privately with Victoria Carlton the following day. Despite the risks, Zora knew she had to go. The truth about her identity, about who she really was, waited at the Carlton estate. Have you ever discovered something that made you question everything you thought you knew about yourself? Type number 1 in the comments if you've ever found an unexpected connection to your past, and hit that like button if you think Zora should trust Victoria. Subscribe now to follow Zora's dangerous journey as she uncovers the truth about her origins. The Carlton family has been hiding dark secrets for decades, but what happens when those secrets refuse to stay buried? Would you risk everything to discover the truth about your past? The following afternoon, Zora approached the Carlton estate with caution, painfully aware that she was entering as a guest rather than staff. The imposing wrought iron gates opened automatically as her rideshare approached. An elderly man in a tailored suit waited at the main entrance. "Miss Jenkins, I'm Thomas, Mrs. Carlton's personal assistant. She's expecting you in the East Wing." He led Zora through a different part of the mansion than she'd seen during the gala, past priceless artwork and antiques that spoke of generations of accumulated wealth. Victoria Carlton waited in a sunlit sitting room, looking frailer than Zora remembered, but with the same intensity in her eyes. "Thank you for coming, Zora. May I call you Zora?" The familiarity was unexpected after their previous formal interaction. "Yes, of course, Mrs. Carlton. Then you must call me Victoria." She gestured to a chair opposite her. "I imagine you have questions about the test results." Zora nodded, removing the paper from her bag. "Is this real? Are we actually related?" Victoria's eyes misted slightly. "Yes. I believe you are my granddaughter, Rebecca's daughter, who I was told died 23 years ago." She reached for Zora's hand. "Before we discuss what this means, I want you to understand our family history, so you can grasp the magnitude of what I believe happened." Victoria rose slowly, leading Zora to a different room where portraits lined the walls. The Carlton dynasty began with my grandfather, who made his fortune in textiles. My father expanded into pharmaceuticals during World War II. When I took control in 1977, we became one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. She stopped before a portrait of a younger Victoria, standing confidently in a boardroom. In an industry dominated by men, I had to be twice as tough, twice as smart. I made compromises I'm not proud of, including turning a blind eye to certain business practices. They continued down the hall until reaching a vibrant portrait of a young woman with auburn hair and intelligent eyes, the same woman from the photograph in Victoria's study. Rebecca was different, brilliant but idealistic. She earned her PhD in biochemistry by 24 and joined our research division. That's where she met Elijah Johnson. Victoria's voice softened. He was exceptional, a neurosurgeon developing revolutionary treatment protocols. They connected intellectually first, then romantically. She sighed deeply. I'm ashamed to admit my first reaction was concern about how our social circle would respond to their relationship. It was prejudice, plain and simple, though I convinced myself it was about protecting the company image. Zora remained silent, absorbing the family history that might be her own. Victoria continued. Rebecca was undeterred by the social backlash. She and Elijah married quickly, and she became pregnant soon after. But during this time, Rebecca also discovered troubling information about our company. Victoria led Zora to her private study, unlocking a hidden drawer in her desk. She withdrew a folder of letters, handing them to Zora. Rebecca found evidence that Carlton medications were being tested in predominantly Black communities without proper disclosure of risks. Residents were offered free health care in exchange for participating in trials, but critical information was omitted from consent forms. Zora scanned the letters, recognizing Rebecca's growing horror as she uncovered more details. She confronted Marshall, who was already being groomed to take over the company. He dismissed her concerns, calling them necessary business practices. She threatened to take her findings public. Victoria's hands trembled slightly. A week before her due date, Rebecca was hospitalized with preeclampsia. Marshall called me away for an emergency board meeting that turned out to be relatively minor. When I returned to the hospital hours later, I was told Rebecca had died from complications during delivery, and that the baby, too, had not survived. Victoria wiped away a tear. I was devastated. I requested to see them, but Marshall had already arranged for private handling of the bodies. In my grief, I didn't question it as I should have. Zora felt overwhelmed by the implications. "You think Marshall had something to do with Rebecca's death?" Victoria's expression hardened, not initially. But months later, I found Rebecca's private diary. She had written that she feared for her safety, that Marshall had threatened her directly when she insisted on exposing the company's practices. She met Zora's eyes directly. "I hired private investigators over the years, but every lead went cold. Marshall had been thorough in erasing any trail." "And Elijah?" Zora asked. "What happened to him?" "He disappeared after Rebecca's death. The official story was that he was overcome with grief, possibly suicidal. His body was never found." Victoria looked troubled. I later learned his medical license had been revoked due to allegations of malpractice, allegations that appeared just days after Rebecca's death. The door opened abruptly, and Marshall Carlton entered, his expression darkening when he saw Zora. "Mother, I wasn't aware you had invited her back." His tone was controlled, but hostile. Our legal team advised against further contact given the potential for exploitation. Victoria straightened, her frailty momentarily vanishing. "This is my home, Marshall. I decide who enters it." Marshall's gaze fixed on Zora with unconcealed contempt. "And what fantastic story has she spun for you today? Let me guess, she needs money for medical school?" Victoria held up the DNA results. "The science speaks for itself. Zora is Rebecca's daughter." Marshall's laugh was cold. "DNA tests can be manipulated. This girl is playing on your grief, your desperation to believe Rebecca's child somehow survived." He turned to Zora. "What's your price? Name it now, sign an NDA, and disappear." Before Zora could respond, Thomas burst into the room. "Security reports an intruder on the east grounds," he announced, slightly breathless. "The cameras caught someone near Rebecca's old gardens." Marshall immediately shifted to high alert. "Lock down the property," he ordered into a communication device. Through the window, Zora glimpsed a tall figure fleeing across the carefully manicured lawn, a black man moving with surprising agility despite his apparent age. Marshall noticed her interest. "Someone you know, perhaps? Part of your scam?" He turned to Victoria. "This meeting is over. Mother, you need your rest." He addressed Zora directly. "As for you, our security will escort you out. Any further attempts to contact my mother will result in legal action for harassment and trespassing." As Zora was led from the room, Thomas discreetly pressed a folded paper into her palm. She waited until she was in her rideshare before opening it. An address was written in neat handwriting, followed by 4 words that made her heart race: "He's still alive." The address led Zora to a rundown apartment building in Somerville, a far cry from the opulence of Beacon Hill. She hesitated outside Unit 3B, gathering her courage before knocking softly. Long seconds passed before the door opened a crack, secured by a chain. Dark eyes studied her from the narrow opening. "Who sent you?" The voice was deep, cautious. Zora held up Thomas's note. "Victoria Carlton's assistant gave me this address." The eyes narrowed, focusing on something at her neck. That pendant. Where did you get it? Zora touched the brass necklace instinctively. A thrift store, years ago. After a moment's consideration, the man closed the door, removed the chain, and reopened it fully. He was tall, with dignified silver hair, and the bearing of someone once accustomed to commanding respect. Though aged, Zora immediately recognized him from the photographs. Dr. Elijah Johnson? He gestured for her to enter quickly, checking the hallway before securing multiple locks on the door. The small apartment was spartanly furnished but meticulously organized. Every surface was covered with papers, medical journals, and newspaper clippings in chronological arrangements. I designed that pendant for my daughter, Elijah said, his voice rough with emotion. The pattern is based on a fractal equation Rebecca and I developed. The original was platinum, with diamonds at the vertices. Zora remained standing, suddenly uncertain. Victoria Carlton believes I might be that daughter. Elijah studied her face intently, his expression unreadable. How old are you? 23. Born April 18, 2001. He closed his eyes briefly. The same day Rebecca supposedly died. He gestured to a chair. Sit. This will take time to explain. Once they were seated, Elijah began his story. I didn't die or disappear willingly. I was forced into hiding after being framed for medical malpractice. When Rebecca was hospitalized with preeclampsia, I was barred from treating her despite being a neurosurgeon at the same hospital. Marshall used his influence to keep me away, claiming conflict of interest. His hands clenched. The night she went into labor, I was called away for an emergency consultation that turned out to be fabricated. When I returned, I was told both Rebecca and our baby had died from complications. I demanded to see them, but was denied. Marshall offered his condolences with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elijah rose, retrieving a file from a meticulously organized shelf. 3 days later, while I was still in shock, a patient I had operated on months earlier suddenly died. An investigation found traces of a medication I would never have prescribed in his system. My medical license was suspended pending investigation. His voice hardened. Then the threats began. Anonymous calls warning me to leave Boston if I valued my life. My apartment was broken into, research destroyed. I knew it was Marshall, but couldn't prove it. Zora tried to process the horrifying account. Why would he go to such extremes? Because Rebecca had discovered the truth about Carlton Pharmaceuticals. Elijah opened another file, spreading documents across the table. The company had been developing drugs, specifically targeting genetic markers more common in black populations, marketing them as culturally responsive medicine while hiding devastating side effects. Rebecca found internal memos discussing how certain neighborhoods were selected for trials based on racial demographics and limited legal resources. He showed Zora clinical trial data with alarming mortality rates, carefully obscured in the official reports. Additionally, Marshall had a side operation. Babies born too young, often black mothers were sometimes taken. The women told their infants had died. Records were falsified, and the babies were placed with wealthy families through private adoption agencies connected to Carlton subsidiaries. Zora felt physically ill. Are you saying I might be? Rebecca's baby, our daughter, whom Marshall reported as deceased. Elijah studied her face again. You have Rebecca's chin, her eyebrow arch, my eyes and cheekbones. He hesitated before adding, when Rebecca was 8 months pregnant, we had an ultrasound that showed the baby had a distinctive toe formation. The second toe on the right foot was significantly longer than the first. Do you? Zora removed her shoe without hesitation, revealing exactly that genetic trait. I've always had that. Doctors called it a harmless anomaly. Elijah's composure broke. May I? He asked, reaching toward her hand. When she nodded, he took her hand in both of his, tears forming in his eyes. For 23 years, I believed my family was gone. I've spent that time gathering evidence against Marshall Carlton, staying alive long enough to expose what he did. He released her hand to retrieve the flash drive from his desk. I have documentation of payments to doctors who certified false deaths, records of babies reassigned through Carlton-controlled agencies, evidence of experimental drugs administered to Rebecca without her knowledge. Zora showed him the DNA test results. This confirms I'm Victoria's granddaughter. Elijah nodded slowly. Victoria wasn't involved in Marshall's schemes. She had her flaws, her prejudices, but she loved Rebecca. Marshall manipulated her, isolated her, used her grief to consolidate his control of the company. He returned to the window, checking the street below with practiced vigilance. I've been watching Victoria for years, looking for an opportunity to approach her safely. Marshall controls her access to information, screens her visitors, monitors her communications. How did you know about me? Zora asked. I work at several hospitals as a janitor under different names. 6 months ago, I saw you during your clinical rotation at Boston General. The resemblance was striking enough that I began observing you, but I needed verification before approaching. I couldn't risk Marshall discovering me. A sudden electronic chirp from a device on Elijah's desk interrupted them. He moved quickly, checking a small security monitor. They found me. We don't have much time. He grabbed a backpack that appeared ready for this moment. Marshall's security team has been searching for me for years. They must have followed you. Panic rose in Zora's chest. I didn't notice anyone. They're professionals, Elijah interrupted, moving to a window that led to the fire escape. We need to leave, now. He handed Zora the flash drive and a small key. This drive contains all the evidence I've gathered. The key opens a safe deposit box at First Commonwealth Bank, Box 419. It contains your original birth certificate with footprint records that will match your prints now. The sound of heavy footsteps in the stairwell spurred them into action. Elijah led Zora down the fire escape and through a series of alleyways with the familiarity of someone who had planned this escape route long ago. They paused in the shadow of a dumpster as black SUVs with tinted windows converged on the apartment building. We need to separate, Elijah insisted. They're looking for an old man, not a young woman. You'll be safer alone. Zora clutched his arm. I just found you. I'm not losing you again. Elijah's expression softened momentarily. Victoria's annual charity gala is tomorrow evening. Thomas can get us both in. Meet me at the service entrance at 8. He squeezed her hand. Keep the drive safe. If anything happens to me, take everything to the FBI, not local police. Marshall has too many connections locally. As they prepared to part ways, Elijah added, the necklace was always meant to find its way back to family. Its design contains a message about truth and connection that transcends time. He touched the pendant briefly. Rebecca would be so proud of the woman you've become. With one last look, he disappeared into the urban landscape, leaving Zora alone with the weight of her newly discovered past and the dangerous knowledge of what the Carlton empire was built upon. Zora returned to her apartment with constant glances over her shoulder, the flash drive secure in her inner pocket. Her hand trembled as she unlocked her door, pushing it open to reveal chaos within. Drawers emptied onto the floor, furniture upended, even her mattress slashed open. Someone had been searching for something, and they hadn't cared about being subtle. A chill ran down her spine as she realized they might still be there, but a quick check confirmed she was alone with the destruction. Her laptop was missing, along with several textbooks and her clinical notes. Even her spare uniform had been taken. Zora quickly packed a small bag with essentials, knowing she couldn't stay there. As she zipped the bag closed, her phone rang with the university's number. Miss Jenkins, this is Dean Walsh. I need you to come to my office immediately regarding a serious academic integrity issue. The dean's voice was cold, formal. What issue? Zora asked, though she already suspected Marshall's influence. We have evidence suggesting you've falsified clinical hours and plagiarized research. Dr. Green has filed a formal complaint with substantial documentation. This is a matter that could result in immediate expulsion. Zora's stomach dropped. I've never falsified anything. My work is my own. That will be determined at a disciplinary hearing. Until then, you're suspended from clinical rotations and campus facilities. The call ended before Zora could respond. She sat on her destroyed bed, mind racing. In less than 24 hours, she had lost her apartment, her academic standing, and any sense of normalcy. The only thing she had gained was a dangerous truth. Her phone buzzed with a text from a former professor, Dr. Winters. "Whatever they're saying, it's not right. Marshall Carlton is a major university trustee. Be careful." Minutes later, campus security arrived to escort her from university housing, citing the pending investigation. Students watched from doorways as Zora was marched across campus, her few belongings in a backpack, humiliation burning in her chest. One of the officers whispered, "Board trustees made calls. Never seen anything push through this fast." As Zora walked away from campus, a black SUV identical to those at Elijah's apartment crawled alongside her. She ducked into a crowded shopping center, weaving through shoppers until she was confident she had lost her tail. With limited options, she called the only person she trusted who might have access to information she needed. "Javier, it's Zora. I need help, and it might be dangerous." Her fellow nursing student had always been kind to her, and importantly, worked part-time in hospital records. They met at a quiet cafe far from campus. Javier's usual smile was replaced with concern. "What's going on? The whole nursing department's talking about your suspension." Zora kept her explanation vague but honest. "I've been framed because I discovered something powerful people want hidden. I need to access sealed birth records from April 2001 at Carlton Medical Center." Javier's eyes widened. "Those would be restricted, especially anything connected to the Carlton family. But," he hesitated, "I might have a workaround. My supervisor's badge has higher clearance than mine." After his shift began, Javier texted Zora to meet him at the hospital's service entrance. He looked nervous as he led her through back corridors to the records department. "We have 20 minutes before the overnight security sweep," he explained, swiping his supervisor's badge. The archives were dimly lit and smelled of old paper, despite the modern digital systems. Javier logged into a terminal, bypassing several security prompts. "Here we go. April 2001 birth records." As they scrolled through entries, Javier pointed out anomalies. "Look at these timestamps. They've been altered. And these patient numbers don't follow the standard sequence." Zora found Rebecca Carlton Johnson's record, which stated simply, "Stillbirth, female, complications from maternal death." No details, no measurements, no footprints, unlike the surrounding records. "Can you check if there were any abandoned babies reported that same day?" Zora asked. Javier typed rapidly, then froze. "There's an entry, but," he pointed to obvious signs of tampering. "Someone modified this years after the fact, created a false abandonment case that links to foster system records." A sudden alarm blared through the room. "Security alert in medical records," announced an automated voice. "Unauthorized access detected." Javier paled. "That's impossible. I used authorized credentials." They quickly logged out, but as they slipped through the emergency exit, Javier checked his phone. "They're tracking the badge in real time. And," he looked up in horror, "someone's accessing the terminal we just used with my ID right now. They're setting me up, too." Outside in the parking lot, Zora checked the flash drive Elijah had given her. It contained exactly what he had described: evidence of Marshall's conspiracy against his own sister and her husband, payments to doctors who certified false deaths, lists of babies reassigned through Carlton-controlled adoption agencies, evidence of experimental drugs administered to Rebecca without consent. Most damning were photos showing Marshall meeting privately with the doctor who signed Rebecca's death certificate, days before her hospitalization. Zora contacted investigative journalist Sarah Chen, known for her exposés on medical ethics violations. They arranged to meet the following morning, but Sarah never arrived. A text came instead. "In hospital. Car accident. Brake lines cut. Be careful who you trust." With increasing desperation, Zora made her way to First Commonwealth Bank. The safe deposit box Elijah had mentioned contained her original birth certificate, complete with footprints that matched her own unique toe formation. Also inside was Rebecca's personal journal, the final entries chilling in their prescience. "Marshall threatened me directly today, said I would regret choosing Elijah and our baby over family legacy. I've secured copies of all evidence with my lawyer. If anything happens to me, the truth must come out. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Marshall knows everything. Victoria asking for you. Fallen ill suddenly. Minutes later, a news alert appeared on Zora's phone. Carlton Pharmaceutical's CEO Marshall Carlton announces mother's declining health, cites dementia diagnosis, assumes full control of company operations, effective immediately. When Zora attempted to visit Victoria at the hospital, she was stopped at the entrance. Mrs. Carlton is under restricted access by family orders, the security guard informed her. And we've been instructed to watch for you specifically, Miss Jenkins. With Victoria isolated, Elijah in hiding, and her own reputation systematically destroyed, Zora realized she had only one option left. The annual Carlton Foundation Gala was that evening, the only opportunity to reach Victoria and expose Marshall publicly. She would need to infiltrate the event, this time not as staff, but as someone with a mission to reveal decades of buried crimes. Do you think Zora is making the right decision by confronting Marshall publicly? Type number 1 in the comments, if you believe the truth should always come out no matter the risk, or number 2, if you think she's putting herself in too much danger. Hit that like button if you've been shocked by the Carlton family's dark secrets, and subscribe to see what happens when Zora risks everything at the gala. Will Victoria recognize her granddaughter in time? Can Elijah finally get justice after 23 years in hiding? The most dangerous confrontation is coming, and you won't want to miss the shocking moment when the entire Carlton empire begins to crumble. Miguel Rodriguez had been sympathetic when Zora explained she needed access to the Carlton Gala without sharing the full, dangerous truth. As a catering supervisor who had always treated her fairly, he reluctantly agreed to add her to the service staff list, though his worried expression suggested he sensed she was in trouble. Security is tighter than usual this year, he warned, as they approached the service entrance of the Carlton estate. Metal detectors, ID verification, even handheld scanners. Mr. Carlton specifically requested additional measures. Zora nodded, adjusting the short black wig that changed her appearance just enough to avoid immediate recognition. I appreciate this, Miguel. I just need to deliver something to Mrs. Carlton. Then I'm gone. The lie felt justified given the stakes. Security procedures were indeed extensive. Guards compared each staff member against photo IDs, conducted thorough bag searches, and ran metal detector wands over everyone. Zora held her breath as she passed through, the flash drive hidden in a hollow heel of her serving shoes, the birth certificate and other documents sealed in waterproof plastic and taped to her inner thigh. Once inside, she quickly assessed the situation. The grand ballroom was arranged for Marshall's keynote address, with Victoria's wheelchair positioned prominently on the stage. Even from a distance, Zora could see that the elderly woman appeared sedated, her normally alert eyes unfocused as a private nurse hovered nearby. Marshall circulated confidently among Boston's elite, accepting congratulations on his recent assumption of full company control. Zora overheard fragments of his conversation with a security team leader. Especially watchful for a young black woman, early 20s, and an older black man. They may attempt to contact my mother. Consider them dangerous and delusional. The guard nodded. We've doubled the team, sir, and all exits are monitored. No one will reach Mrs. Carlton without approval. Maintaining her disguise, Zora served champagne to guests while gradually working her way closer to the stage. She noticed Dr. Green among the VIP attendees, engaged in animated conversation with Marshall. Their familiar body language suggested a relationship beyond professional acquaintance. She positioned herself near enough to overhear snippets of their discussion. The preliminary results are promising, Dr. Green was saying. The genetic targeting mechanism is responding exactly as predicted in the models. Marshall nodded approvingly. The board will be pleased. The potential market in targeted pharmaceuticals is unprecedented, especially with the regulatory framework we've established. Dr. Green lowered his voice. There have been some concerning side effects in subjects with the specific genetic markers we're targeting, but nothing that can't be managed in the messaging. Zora recognized the euphemisms from Elijah's evidence. Genetic targeting was code for developing drugs that affected people with genetic markers more common in certain racial groups. Subjects meant unwitting test patients. Managed in the messaging meant hiding dangerous side effects. Marshall glanced at his watch. It's almost time for the announcement. Is everything prepared for the university partnership reveal? Doctor. Green smiled confidently. Absolutely. The Board of Trustees has approved the Research Center funding without knowing the full scope of our work. Your generous donation was very persuasive. As they moved toward the stage, Zora scanned the room for any sign of Elijah. She spotted him across the ballroom, disguised as an elderly server with a gray mustache and glasses. Their eyes met briefly before he deliberately looked away, a slight nod his only acknowledgement. Marshall approached the podium as the lights dimmed. Distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. Tonight marks a historic moment for Carlton Pharmaceuticals and for medicine itself. His practiced charm was evident as he outlined the company's supposed commitment to advancing healthcare for all communities. Today, I'm proud to announce a groundbreaking partnership with Boston Medical University, establishing the Carlton Center for Personalized Medicine. Applause filled the room as Dr. 7217T2 Green joined Marshall on stage. Our pioneering research in genetic response factors will revolutionize how medications are developed and prescribed, particularly for communities historically underserved by traditional pharmaceutical approaches. The coded language made Zora's skin crawl. She knew from Elijah's evidence what this really meant, continuing the company's practice of testing potentially dangerous drugs on Black communities while marketing them as specially formulated for their needs. As Marshall continued his speech, Zora noticed security personnel speaking into their communication devices, their eyes scanning the crowd with increased urgency. One guard was examining staff photographs, and Zora realized her disguise might not hold much longer. She needed to act quickly. Across the room, Elijah created a timely diversion by accidentally on purpose dropping a tray of glasses. While attention focused on the commotion, Zora slipped closer to Victoria and managed to press a folded note into the elderly woman's hand. Victoria's fingers closed around the paper automatically, but her eyes remained unfocused until she glanced down at the message. Suddenly, awareness seemed to flood back into her expression. Her gaze sharpened, scanning the room until she found Zora in her server's uniform. Recognition flashed across Victoria's face, followed by what appeared to be desperate relief. "You there," Victoria called out, her voice stronger than her appearance would suggest. The young server. "Come here, please." Marshall quickly moved to intercept, placing a restraining hand on his mother's shoulder. "Mother, you're confused again. Let's not interrupt the event." Victoria shrugged off his hand with surprising force. "I am not confused, Marshall. I want to speak with that young woman, and I will do so now." Her voice carried across the now silent ballroom. "If anyone attempts to stop me, I will have the entire security team fired immediately. This is still my house, and these are still my employees." The security team exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly caught between Marshall's earlier instructions and Victoria's direct command. Victoria's reputation for firing people who crossed her apparently remained intimidating enough that they stepped aside, allowing Zora to approach. Marshall's face contorted with barely controlled rage as he whispered harshly to his mother. "This is exactly why you need supervised care. Your judgment is compromised." Victoria ignored him, gesturing Zora closer. "Help me to the library, dear. I need a moment away from all this excitement." Once in the private library with the doors closed, Victoria's demeanor changed completely. She sat up straighter, her eyes clear and focused. "Show me what you have." Quickly, we don't have much time. Zora produced the birth certificate with the matching footprints. "This proves I'm your granddaughter." "And this," she added, showing Rebecca's journal, "proves Marshall was threatening her before her death." Victoria examined the documents, her hands trembling. "He's been drugging me," she confessed. "Small doses in my evening tea, enough to make me appear confused and forgetful. I've been secretly disposing of it when possible, but he watches me closely." Before they could say more, the door burst open. Marshall stood with 4 security guards. "This has gone far enough," he announced coldly. "Mother, doctor, Winters confirms your condition is deteriorating. You need rest." He turned to the guards. "Please escort Miss Jenkins from the premises. She is exploiting my mother's condition for financial gain." Victoria stood shakily. "If anyone touches her, I will have them arrested for assault." Marshall's smile was chilling. "Mother, everyone here has witnessed your confusion. As your legal guardian following the court's competency ruling this morning, I'm acting in your best interest." He nodded to the guards. "Remove her." As they moved toward Zora, Elijah entered the room. "Stop this, Marshall." His disguise was gone, revealing his true identity. Marshall's expression flickered between shock and triumph. "Dr. Johnson, how convenient. The man who abandoned his child after contributing to my sister's death suddenly reappears." He addressed the security team. "This is the other intruder I warned you about. Detain him as well." Victoria gasped at the sight of Elijah. "You're alive? All these years?" Elijah maintained his focus on Marshall. "Your sister discovered your criminal enterprise. You killed her to protect it, then stole our daughter and tried to destroy me." Marshall laughed dismissively. "Paranoid delusions. This man's medical license was revoked for negligence. He's been in hiding to avoid the consequences of his actions." Before Elijah could respond, security personnel grabbed his arms. Another set moved toward Zora. "I have evidence," she announced desperately. "Documentation of everything Marshall has done, including drugging Victoria and framing Elijah." Marshall's confident expression didn't waver. "Search her thoroughly." As the guards began to comply, Victoria called out, "Everyone out. I wish to address my guests." Her commanding tone, honed through decades of corporate leadership, momentarily froze everyone in place. Marshall recovered first. "Mother, you're not well. Let me handle this." Victoria's response was ice cold. "I'm feeling suddenly unwell, Marshall. In fact, I believe all our guests should leave while I consult with my physician." She raised her voice to carry beyond the library. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, but I must ask everyone to depart. A family matter requires immediate attention." Murmurs of concern spread through the crowd as Victoria's announcement was relayed. Marshall's careful facade cracked slightly as he realized the gala was disintegrating. "This is unnecessary, Mother. Your medication seems to be wearing off." He caught himself too late, the slip revealing more than intended. As guests began collecting their belongings, Marshall turned to the head of security. "No one leaves with any Carlton property. Search the servers before they exit." His gaze fixed on Zora. "Especially this one. She's a known thief." Zora backed toward the door as security closed in. Victoria called out, "Zora, run!" Taking advantage of the momentary confusion, Zora slipped through the doorway into the crowded hallway where departing guests provided temporary cover. She could hear Marshall shouting orders as she navigated through the mansion, desperately searching for a safe exit. All she needed was enough time to get the evidence to someone who could act on it. Behind her, the sound of pursuing footsteps grew closer. Zora's heart pounded as she navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the Carlton mansion, grateful for her previous work there that had familiarized her with some of its layout. Thomas had mentioned service passages during their brief interactions, and she now searched desperately for one of these hidden entrances. Behind a seemingly decorative panel in the hallway, she discovered a narrow servants' corridor, slipping inside just as security rounded the corner. The passage was dimly lit and dusty from disuse, suggesting the current staff rarely accessed these historic routes. Zora moved quietly through the network of narrow hallways, orienting herself by the muffled sounds of departing guests on the other side of the walls. Her objective was clear: reach Victoria's private quarters to gather evidence of Marshall's drugging regimen, then find a way to expose him publicly before he could silence them all. After several wrong turns, she finally recognized a small door that would lead to the family's private wing based on the mansion floor plan she had studied earlier that day. Easing it open, she found herself in a plush hallway adorned with Carlton family photographs. A sound from nearby made her freeze, pressing against the wall. 2 security guards passed, speaking quietly. "Check the east wing again. Mr. Carlton is offering a $5,000 bonus to whoever finds her." Once they had moved on, Zora slipped down the corridor toward Victoria's suite, identified by the ornate double doors at the end of the hall. Inside, the opulent bedroom showed signs of Victoria's declining independence. Prescription bottles lined the nightstand, alongside a silver tea service. Zora quickly photographed the medication labels with her phone, recognizing several powerful sedatives and antipsychotics typically used for late-stage dementia patients, not someone with Victoria's obvious mental clarity. Beside these was an unmarked vial of clear liquid. Zora carefully pocketed it for testing, suspecting it contained the drugs Marshall was using to simulate dementia symptoms. A sound in the hallway forced her to hide in the adjacent bathroom. Through the cracked door, she observed Marshall and Dr. Green enter Victoria's bedroom, their conversation already in progress. "The situation is under control," Marshall was saying. "Mother will be sedated tonight and transferred to the private facility tomorrow. The paperwork is already filed." Dr. Green nodded. "And the girl? The evidence she claims to have?" Marshall's expression darkened. "Security will find her. Nothing leaves this house that could compromise us." He moved to the window, looking out over the gardens where guests were departing. "I should have dealt with Johnson years ago. I underestimated his determination." "What about the DNA test, Doctor?" Green asked. "That's harder to explain away." Marshall waved dismissively. "DNA can be challenged. Environmental factors, testing errors. Besides, we control the narrative. By morning, both Victoria and Zora will be described as mentally unstable. The press already has the release about Mother's deteriorating condition." Dr. Green looked uncomfortable. "And if someone connects the dots to Rebecca's death?" Marshall's laugh was chilling. "After 23 years? Impossible. The records are gone, the witnesses silenced." His voice dropped lower. "Rebecca forced my hand when she threatened to expose the company. Sanctimonious fool thought the world needed to know we were developing targeted pharmaceuticals. She would have destroyed everything our family built." Zora's blood ran cold at this casual admission of orchestrating his own sister's death. Dr. Green paced nervously. "And our current project? The university partnership?" "Proceeds exactly as planned," Marshall assured him. "We've been developing drugs specifically designed to affect certain genetic markers more common in Black populations for decades. The new angle is marketing them as culturally appropriate treatments while hiding the selective side effects." He chuckled darkly. "The perfect solution. Target the market that costs the healthcare system the most, reduce their numbers through unfortunate complications, and get praised for developing medications specifically for them." "Doctor," Green lowered his voice, "we've been using the girl's genetic information, you know, from the DNA test. Her markers are ideal for refining the targeting mechanism." Marshall nodded with scientific detachment. "Ironic, isn't it? Rebecca's daughter helping us perfect what Rebecca tried to expose." He checked his watch. "I need to address security again. The loose ends need to be eliminated tonight. Mother, Johnson, the girl, all of them." As they turned to leave, Zora's phone vibrated in her pocket. The sound, though slight, was enough to alert Marshall, who froze. "Did you hear that?" He approached the bathroom door slowly. Zora looked around frantically for an escape route, finding only a narrow window. As Marshall pushed the door open, she forced the window up and squeezed through, dropping painfully to the hedges below. Shouts erupted above her as she sprinted across the garden, Marshall's voice cutting through the night. "There she is! Don't let her leave the grounds!" Security guards converged from multiple directions, forcing Zora to double back toward the main house. With no clear escape route, she made a split-second decision to return to the crowded main hall where the last guests were departing. Her only hope was to publicly expose Marshall before he could silence her. Bursting into the grand hall, Zora found herself face-to-face with several departing board members and local dignitaries. Without hesitation, she raised her voice. "My name is Zora Jenkins, and I am Rebecca Carlton's daughter, stolen at birth after Marshall Carlton orchestrated her death." The room fell silent, as all eyes turned toward her. Marshall entered moments later, security team flanking him. "I apologize for the disruption," he said smoothly. "This young woman is unfortunately mentally unstable. She's been harassing our family with delusional claims. Zora stood her ground. I have DNA proof of my identity. Victoria Carlton confirmed it herself. I also have evidence of Marshall drugging his mother to gain control of the company and documented proof that Carlton Pharmaceuticals has been developing racially targeted drugs with deliberately concealed fatal side effects. Murmurs spread through the crowd as Marshall's face hardened. Security, remove her now. She's clearly disturbed and potentially dangerous. As guards moved toward Zora, Victoria's voice rang out from the entrance to the hall. Stop immediately. All heads turned to see Victoria in her wheelchair, remarkably alert despite her earlier sedated appearance. Beside her stood Elijah, having apparently freed himself during the confusion. Every word she says is true, Victoria announced. This is my granddaughter, and Marshall has been drugging me to appear incompetent. Marshall's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Mother, you're confused again. Dr. Winters confirmed your condition. Did he? Victoria challenged. Or did he confirm what you paid him to find? She gestured to Elijah. This is Dr. Elijah Johnson, my daughter's husband, who Marshall framed for malpractice after arranging Rebecca's death. Security personnel looked increasingly uncertain about whose orders to follow. Marshall attempted damage control. Mother's condition is unfortunately causing paranoid delusions. Dr. Johnson's medical license was revoked for negligence. These accusations are completely unfounded. Dr. Green stepped forward, positioning himself beside Marshall. As Mrs. Carlton's physician, I can confirm her cognitive decline. These outlandish claims are symptomatic of her condition. Zora moved closer to Victoria and Elijah. I have recorded your conversation from Victoria's bedroom just now, Dr. Green. Your admission of using my genetic information to develop targeted drugs and Marshall's confession about orchestrating Rebecca's death. She held up her phone. It's already backed up to multiple secure locations. Marshall's expression contorted with fury as he lunged toward Zora, attempting to seize the phone. Give me that, you little thief. A struggle ensued, security finally intervening but clearly confused about who they should be protecting. Victoria commanded, Security! Protect my granddaughter immediately. The head of security hesitated, decades of conditioning to obey Victoria warring with Marshall's more recent authority. Dr. Green attempted to salvage the situation by addressing the stunned onlookers. Ladies and gentlemen, please disregard this unfortunate display. Miss Jenkins was recently suspended from her nursing program for ethical violations. She's attempting to extort the Carlton family with these fabricated claims. The accusation might have landed if not for the timely arrival of Javier, accompanied by Dr. Wilson, the hospital's records administrator. That's a lie, Javier announced. We've confirmed the hospital records were tampered with. Birth and death certificates were falsified, and Zora's academic file was fraudulently modified just days ago. Marshall, seeing his carefully constructed narrative collapsing, made a desperate move toward his mother. This has gone far enough. Mother needs immediate medical attention. Before he could reach Victoria, police officers entered the hall, responding to a call Thomas had placed earlier. What's happening here? The lead officer asked, surveying the tense scene. Marshall quickly composed himself. Officers, thank you for coming. We have intruders who have manipulated my elderly mother and are attempting to defraud our family. While attention focused on the police, Marshall slipped away toward his office. Zora, noticing his exit, followed despite the risk. She found him in Victoria's study, frantically gathering files from a hidden safe. It's over, Marshall, she said from the doorway. The truth is out. He turned, a pistol now in his hand. Nothing is over until I say it is. Do you have any idea who we are? What power the Carlton name carries in this city? His expression was almost pitying. You think the police will arrest me? The courts will convict me? I'll be free within hours, and this will all be explained away as a tragic misunderstanding. Zora stood her ground. Why do you hate us so much? What did we ever do to you? Marshall's composed mask finally shattered, revealing the hatred beneath. You people have always been a threat to the natural order. Rebecca betrayed her bloodline, contaminated our family with Johnson's genetics. I protected our legacy. He gestured with the gun. The Carlton name stands for something. Generations of breeding, education, refinement. Rebecca would have thrown it all away for her misguided ideals and her half-breed child. The raw racism in his words confirmed everything Elijah had claimed. "You killed your own sister," Zora said quietly. "Your own flesh and blood." Marshall's laugh was hollow. "I saved the company. Our targeted pharmaceuticals program is worth billions." Rebecca would have destroyed it all with her bleeding heart concerns about ethical testing and informed consent. He waved the gun dismissively. "I've planned for every contingency. By tomorrow, you and Johnson will have unfortunately taken your own lives, overcome with guilt for tormenting an elderly woman with false claims. Mother will be receiving the best care at a private facility where her deteriorating condition can be properly managed. And Carlton Pharmaceuticals will continue its important work." He aimed the gun directly at Zora. A tragic but neat conclusion to this unfortunate episode. "Is that what you told Rebecca before you killed her?" Victoria's voice came from the doorway, where she stood supported by Elijah, having left her wheelchair behind. Marshall whirled in shock, momentarily distracted by his mother's unexpected mobility. "Mother, you shouldn't be here." Victoria's expression conveyed decades of grief transforming into rage. "I heard everything, Marshall. Every word of hatred, every admission. My daughter died by your hand." The momentary distraction was enough. As Marshall turned back toward Zora, security personnel tackled him from behind, the gun discharging into the ceiling as he fell. The bullet ricocheted, grazing Zora's arm before embedding in the wall. Blood seeped through her sleeve as Marshall was restrained, still shouting threats and justifications. Victoria rushed to Zora's side, pressing a handkerchief to the wound while police officers flooded the room. "I'm so sorry," Victoria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I should have seen it. I should have protected her, protected you." Elijah joined them, his medical training evident as he properly bandaged Zora's arm. "It's over now," he said softly. "After 23 years, it's finally over." As Marshall was led away in handcuffs, still protesting that they couldn't possibly understand what he'd done for the family legacy, Victoria took both Zora's and Elijah's hands in hers. "We have much to rebuild," she said, her voice gaining strength, "and many wrongs to right, but we'll do it together, as Rebecca would have wanted, as a family." 1 week after the dramatic events at the Carlton mansion, Zora sat in a private hospital room, her arm properly bandaged but healing well. The bullet had only grazed her, leaving what the doctor called a story scar that would fade with time. Victoria and Elijah sat nearby, their unlikely reunion still awkward but warming by the day as they shared memories of Rebecca. "She always twisted her hair when she was concentrating," Victoria recalled, smiling at a photograph of her daughter. "Even as a child, so serious about everything." Elijah nodded. In the operating room, her colleagues always knew when she was onto something important. The hair twisting was our signal to pay attention. They had spent hours like this, piecing together Rebecca's life from their different perspectives, creating a fuller picture for Zora of the mother she never knew. Outside, the world was still reeling from revelations about the Carlton pharmaceutical empire. Police had executed search warrants at company headquarters, uncovering decades of falsified drug trial data. Marshall faced multiple charges, including first-degree murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and corporate malfeasance. His bail had been denied, despite his attorney's arguments about his prominence and community ties. The investigation has uncovered 7 other cases of babies separated from mothers under suspicious circumstances at Carlton-controlled hospitals, Thomas reported, now serving as Victoria's chief of staff rather than just her personal assistant. The FBI has created a task force specifically for this case. Victoria nodded gravely. "We will provide whatever resources they need to find every family affected by Marshall's crimes." She had aged visibly in the past week, the weight of her son's betrayal etching new lines in her face, but her eyes remained clear and determined now that she was free from the drugs he had been administering. "I've filed the paperwork to legally acknowledge you as Rebecca's daughter and my heir," she told Zora. "The Carlton name has been tarnished by Marshall's actions, but perhaps we can rebuild it as something better. I'm proposing we rename the company Johnson Carlton Pharmaceuticals to honor both sides of your heritage." Elijah looked surprised by this gesture, though he had been gradually warming to Victoria despite their complicated history. "The media coverage has been extensive," Thomas continued. "Every major outlet is running the story. They're calling it the Carlton conspiracy." He hesitated before adding, "They're requesting a statement from the family." Victoria straightened in her chair. "Then we'll give them one. Not with prepared remarks or through representatives, but directly. It's time for transparency after decades of secrets." The press conference the following day was unlike anything Boston's medical community had ever witnessed. Victoria Carlton, looking every inch the formidable CEO despite her 81-year age, faced cameras with Zora and Elijah flanking her. 23 years ago, a terrible injustice was committed by Carlton Pharmaceuticals under my son's direction, she began, her voice unwavering. "My daughter Rebecca discovered unethical practices in our drug trials, particularly those targeting black communities. For attempting to expose these crimes, she paid with her life, and her daughter was stolen and placed in foster care." Victoria outlined the company's historical wrongs without minimizing or excusing them. "I failed as a leader by not investigating thoroughly when my daughter died. I failed as a mother by trusting the wrong child. Today begins our long journey toward atonement." She announced a major initiative funding healthcare improvements in underserved black communities nationwide, starting with those most affected by Carlton drug trials. Additionally, we are establishing the Rebecca Johnson Memorial Scholarship for black medical students, with guaranteed residency positions at our affiliated hospitals. After the press conference, the university president personally visited Zora's hospital room, offering a formal apology for her treatment. "Dr. Green has been suspended pending a full investigation," he explained. "Your academic record has been restored, with commendations added for your exceptional clinical work." Zora accepted the apology with grace, though the experience had fundamentally changed her relationship with the institution. "I'll finish my degree," she told Victoria and Elijah later, "but I'm thinking beyond traditional nursing now. With these resources, I could help address systemic racism in healthcare on a larger scale." Elijah nodded approvingly. Rebecca would be proud of that vision. He had been offered a position leading Carlton Pharmaceuticals' new ethical oversight division, a role that would allow him to ensure research protocols protected all communities equally. "There's something else," Victoria said, retrieving a folder from her briefcase. Thomas found additional historical records in Marshall's private safe. The Carlton family's ties to racial discrimination go back generations, including investment in businesses that profited from segregation. She handed the documents to Zora. "This belongs to you now. What we do with this knowledge is your decision." Zora spent days reading through the family history, wrestling with her newfound connection to both privilege and prejudice. Her entire identity had been upended, moving from a struggling nursing student to heir of a pharmaceutical fortune overnight. The responsibility was overwhelming. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this," she confessed to Elijah during a quiet moment. He regarded her thoughtfully. "None of us are ever ready for the weight of truth. Rebecca wasn't. I wasn't. But you have something we didn't." "What's that?" "Us," he said simply. "You don't have to carry this alone." Gradually, a support network formed around families affected by Carlton Pharmaceuticals' unethical practices. Zora organized regular meetings where victims could share their experiences and access resources for justice. Javier, who had risked his career to help Zora, was offered a prestigious research internship previously denied to qualified black applicants, part of the company's new commitment to equitable opportunities. 3 weeks after Marshall's arrest, Zora visited him in prison, seeking answers only he could provide. The meeting was brief and unsatisfying. Marshall remained unrepentant, his contempt barely concealed. "She was weak," he said of Rebecca. "Brilliant, but weak." She couldn't see the bigger picture. When Zora asked about her mother's final days, hoping for some fragment of connection to the woman she never knew, Marshall offered only one detail. "Her last words were about you. She made me promise you'd be safe," he laughed bitterly. I suppose in my way, I kept that promise. You lived, after all. Zora left the prison with mixed emotions but one certainty. Marshall's shares in the company, which he still legally owned, should not remain his. Working with Victoria's attorneys, she established a foundation that would receive all profits from those shares, supporting families separated by systemic racism in healthcare, adoption, and foster care. On a bright spring morning, exactly 23 years after Rebecca's death, Victoria, Elijah, and Zora gathered in the newly established Rebecca Johnson Research Center for Ethical Pharmaceuticals. The facility's mission, carved into stone above its entrance, echoed Rebecca's original goal: healing without harm, progress without prejudice. Victoria had aged noticeably since Marshall's crimes were revealed, but her mind remained sharp. "I have something for you," she told Zora, opening a velvet box to reveal the platinum version of the geometric pendant. "This belongs with you now. Rebecca wore it every day while carrying you." Zora touched it reverently before putting it around her neck, alongside the brass version that had started their journey. "The design isn't just beautiful," Elijah explained. "It contains encoded meaning. The pattern represents an equation Rebecca developed for drug interactions across diverse genetic profiles. But I based it on an ancient African symbol, meaning, 'Truth always rises.'" Victoria nodded. How appropriate that it found its way back to family, despite everything Marshall did to prevent it. Together, they reviewed applications from Black medical students for the inaugural scholarship program, each bringing different perspectives to the selection process. The first class would begin that fall, launching a new generation of healthcare providers committed to equitable treatment for all communities. As they worked, a newly commissioned portrait waited in the hall, soon to join the Carlton family gallery. It showed Rebecca Johnson in her lab coat, intelligent eyes gazing directly at the viewer, challenging them to live up to her ethical standards. Beside it hung a smaller frame containing the brass and platinum pendants merged into a new design, symbolizing the joining of separated families and the power of truth to overcome even the most carefully constructed lies. "Do you think she would be proud of what we're building?" Zora asked, looking at her mother's portrait. Victoria and Elijah exchanged glances before Victoria answered. "She would be proud of who you've become. The rest is just details." Elijah nodded in agreement. Rebecca believed one person with courage could change systems that seemed immovable. "You've proven her right." As they continued their work, Zora touched both pendants at her neck, feeling a connection to the mother she never knew, and the legacy she was now reclaiming, transforming, and extending into a future Rebecca could only have hoped for. What would you do if you discovered your entire identity was based on a lie? Has this story made you think about the hidden injustices that might exist in our healthcare system? Leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and if this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who need to hear it. The truth doesn't stay buried forever, and sometimes the smallest objects, like a thrift store necklace, can unravel the most carefully guarded secrets. Thank you for following Zora's journey from invisible server to powerful advocate for change. Together, we can all work toward a world where truth and justice rise, no matter how long they've been suppressed. This story reveals how systemic racism can infiltrate even the most respected institutions, poisoning them from within while maintaining a veneer of legitimacy. The Carlton Pharmaceuticals case demonstrates how power and privilege can be weaponized to silence truth-tellers and perpetuate injustice across generations. Marshall's willingness to murder his own sister, rather than allow her to expose racist practices, shows the extremes to which people will go to protect systems that benefit them. Yet the story also highlights the persistence of truth, how a simple necklace became the key to unraveling decades of deception. Zora's journey reminds us that our identities are shaped not only by our origins, but by our choices in the face of injustice. Victoria's evolution from complicity to accountability demonstrates that redemption begins with acknowledging harm and taking concrete steps toward repair. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative illustrates how racial discrimination in healthcare continues to operate through sophisticated mechanisms that require vigilance to detect and dismantle. The establishment of the Rebecca Johnson Research Center symbolizes how institutions built on exploitation can be transformed into forces for healing and equity when the full truth is finally acknowledged and addressed by those with the courage to face it. Have you ever wondered what secrets might be hidden in your family history? Or how systems of discrimination might be operating invisibly in institutions you trust? This story of racial injustice and eventual redemption reminds us that the truth has a way of emerging, even after decades of suppression. If this story of a young black woman discovering her true identity and fighting against racist pharmaceutical practices moved you, please hit that like button right now. How would you react if you discovered your entire identity was based on a lie? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We're creating more powerful stories that expose hidden injustices in our society, so make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next upload. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how racism can operate behind closed doors in supposedly respectable institutions. Thank you for joining us on Zora's journey from invisibility to empowerment. Together, we can bring more hidden truths into the light.